usurper, a false idol. My eyes have been opened. Let me help you to see, Slayer.
So when it comes to games that have influenced so many others, not many compare with the juggernaut of the original Doom and its sequel. We had the 2016 reboot, which proved that the Doom formula, along with its changes, could still be a success in modern gaming, and just as Doom 2 improved upon the original in the 90s, Doom Eternal does the same all these years later. It will surely divide a large group of players, as the changes made won't be for everyone, and many gamers I feel will favour the 2016 offering more, but I found Doom Eternal to improve on that in several key areas, which made the whole experience that much more memorable and flat out fun. From its stunning graphics and performance, lengthy campaign, diversity in gameplay and environments, plus the several difficulty settings, Doom Eternal is definitely one game that's worth checking out. There are a few areas where it stumbles, but overall, it always picks itself up and delivers a fast-paced gore fest which will see your heart rate increase a lot when dispatching the hordes of demons as you embrace and lose yourself in the gameplay loop of violence and bloodshed. This is Doom Eternal, and where the Doom franchise proves once again it's a force to be reckoned with in first-person shooters. I'll touch on the story first, which sees the Doomslayer fight over several planets and locations in order to hunt down and kill the Hell Priest, which will then allow players to move on to more important bosses. Now, that's an incredibly simplified description of Doom Eternal's story, and the reason for that is because I never really cared what was happening or going on. For those interested, the story itself goes more in depth when you take into account the item descriptions and try and piece parts together, but the game also differs from its predecessor in that it tries to implement a more cinematic feel with more cutscenes and dialogue. For the majority of people, this will take a backseat to the rest of the game, which it did for myself, as Doom Eternal's strengths lie elsewhere. So apart from being introduced to what's going on with the story, the next area you'll notice quite quickly is that of just how amazing the graphics and visual presentation are in this game. Seriously, watching Doom Eternal will no doubt have you orgasming through your eyeballs constantly. If anyone asks me what I value with graphics when it comes to first-person shooters, then I rank resolution, texture quality, and performance as the main aspects where I want the graphics to shine. Through some sorcery, id Software has managed to somehow weird science all of these together to create a feast for the eyes and bring them all together in one package. Every area of Doom Eternal has had such love and care put into its visual presentation that I couldn't help but be impressed. The sheer variety in what you're seeing at all times on screen really brings the hellish visuals, cityscapes, and diverse indoor environments to life. But even with that variety, the quality of the textures are of such a high standard mostly throughout, and it all improves upon what was on the table in 2016. Playing on the Xbox One X, the game is not running at a full 4K resolution, but it's of no consequence at all when a game can look this good. And then we get to the performance. All of this visual gloss would be for nothing if the game ran like a dog with no legs, but Doom Eternal quite frankly runs like a dog with 8 legs. It's just so buttery smooth. It regularly nails that magic 60 frames a second sweet spot, which the game most definitely needs, with only slight dips here and there, which I never felt impacted the gameplay negatively. Doom Eternal is a showcase for each system that it's on, and that continues through to the very good lighting from weapons flash or the glow of fire from enemies and the environment such as the skyboxes. But when we take all of these parts and set them in fairly large areas sometimes, then it becomes even more impressive. Two levels which I wanted to make special mention of are the Super Gore Nest and Urdak, with the former probably being my favourite area in the whole game. It looks amazing, runs amazing, and the attention to detail at every turn is simply exquisite. Plus, Doom Eternal has variety between levels, so everything usually looks different to what you've experienced previously. But one area of Doom Eternal which will divide some people, but which I adored, was that of its gameplay loop. So in Doom 2016, how the level or encounters basically played out the same each time was that of the Gore Nest, which once you interacted with it, then enemies would start to spawn in. Now this still happens in Doom Eternal when it comes to enemies appearing basically out of nowhere, but each area often has the enemies which are already in place to begin with, which I always enjoy far more in any game that does this. But id Software has made the interactions with these enemies different, which changes the gameplay a little compared to Doom 2016, and that's for one reason. Ammo in Doom Eternal is very low most of the time and feels like you're shooting gold bars at everyone because it's that valuable. Apart from the classic Doom ammo pickups, the way to obtain more is to whip out that chainsaw and get right up in the face of your enemies to take them down. This makes close range combat a necessity to replenish your ammo reserves, so simply hanging back and attacking from afar is only an option for a short time, but you'll also want to get up close for those glory kills, which will help fill your health back up as well. But this constant ranged and close combat and needing to use your full arsenal of weapons was the gameplay loop that kept on giving. Shooting a grenade in one enemy's mouth as to stun them, then going for the kill, or my personal favourite, acquiring the ability to slow down time whilst aiming in the air, activating the meat hook with the super shotgun, and letting both barrels empty straight into the enemy's head. It makes you feel powerful, but there will be multiple times when you'll only scrape by the encounters by the narrowest of margins, and it's thrilling. The heart-stopping action is only beefed up even further with the electro rock soundtrack, which kicks in all the time, and it easily meets the standard for Doom music that was set all the way back in the 90s and in 2016, and it continues for Doom Eternal. The sound design when it comes to sound effects such as weapon fire is good, but I didn't find it overly great, especially when compared to the music. I found the weapons could lack a little bit of punch, and that goes for the super shotgun, which I adore, or the rocket launcher, chain gun, and all the rest. When the graphics and soundtrack are of such a high standard, it's far easier to pick out what is lacking, and the sound effects overall got the job done without blowing me away. Surprisingly though, I really enjoyed the deep, bassy-like thud that would accompany the Doomslayer when grabbing onto one of the walls in the platforming parts of the game. And this emphasis on action, constantly moving and using all of the weapons, kicks off right from the start of the game, where players no longer start off with an almost worthless and underpowered pistol. Sure, it had some sort of purpose back in 2016, but it is now gone in Doom Eternal thankfully, and players start the game with a shotgun instead, which is that much better. The weapons are all classic Doom, like the aforementioned shotgun, the plasma rifle and chain gun, the BFG or rocket launcher, or the incredibly powerful melee weapon of the Crucible. A large, sword-like weapon that can take down powerful enemies in one hit. But my personal favourite, and always has been with Doom, is the super shotgun. It's incredibly powerful up close and effective on most enemies, and when upgraded with the meat hook attachment, it takes an already fantastic weapon and turns it into one of my favourite weapons in any shooter. Players are able to unlock further enhancements to their arsenal as well, with all of the weapons to make them even more effective. For example, the meat hook can be upgraded to set enemies on fire. The rocket launcher can have a lock-on, which will then shoot out 3 rockets that hone in on the target, or the heavy cannon can have a zoom feature, making it easier to target specific parts of an enemy from afar. All of the weapons, along with all of the upgrades as well as your grenades, are needed to overcome the challenges in Doom Eternal, and this is especially true on the different difficulty settings. There is no doubt the game can be very challenging for all players, even on the easiest settings. If you're unfamiliar with first-person shooters or don't play them very often, when you combine that with the speed of the gameplay, then you'll definitely find the game a challenge. For more skilled players, bumping up that difficulty to Ultra Violence, Nightmare and beyond is going to give you some tough times more than once, and be prepared for some frustration as well. The game is a challenge, but also gives a sense of accomplishment, and with the fast, frantic and fun gameplay, you'll want to keep pushing forward, and the more I played it, the more it gave me memories of playing Quake 3 Arena back on the PC and Dreamcast, needing to move constantly, plus the jump pads scattered throughout the levels. But if you find yourself struggling with a particular boss, after a few unsuccessful attempts, the game will offer the player the option to tackle the boss whilst wearing Sentinel armor, and this will greatly increase your survivability, and it basically drops the challenge that goes along with the boss encounters. But running and gunning won't be the only movement players will be taking part in, with the inclusion of what will be divisive amongst gamers, and that's with the platforming that's included. There are dozens of times where players will be asked to jump to different platforms and grabbable walls in order to ascend to higher or lower ground. Some gamers will find these parts frustrating and something that simply breaks up the action that Doom is known for, whilst others will see them as a means to take a break. I actually enjoyed these sections, being in an area and trying to work out how to move on to the next section, and those situations often involve some sort of platforming. For those who don't like them, it could feel that it's also just padding out the length of the game for no real reason or benefit. But I must admit that double jumping and dashing in order to find success with these platforming sections was good. Even after the 20 hours of playtime, I never found them to be an issue, and often these platforms can be used to access secrets which are scattered throughout the level, such as extra lives or Doom collectibles. It's a good idea to try and explore all parts of the levels, as it can lead to finding items to help you upgrade the Doomslayer suit, or finding Slayergate keys for optional encounters which can give you further rewards, which I won't spoil. But for everything Doom Eternal does well, and believe me, it does a lot very well, there are a few inclusions or areas which didn't impress me as much. Let's start with the enemy of the Marauder. This annoying guy will be introduced to players as a mini-boss around the halfway mark during the campaign. He can be quite the challenge, especially on the higher difficulties, but the challenge isn't the problem I have with the Marauder. The problem lies in the mechanics that surround the encounters, the number of them, and how it basically goes against what the rest of the game is. Doom Eternal wants you to keep moving, chainsawing enemies for more ammo and health, and switching between your weapons due to the low ammo reserves. But apart from constantly moving, the Marauder encounters offers less options when fighting them, and their several appearances ends up with just becoming annoying. The enemy is immune to certain weapons, and he carries a shield which suddenly appears in front of him if you try and fight him in any other way than what the game wants you to do. He can also summon an apparition, which is just an extra annoyance as well. You need to keep yourself in the medium range to fight him, and wait for his eyes to flash green when he gets closer to you. This indicates he is susceptible to damage at that time. Shooting him will make him stagger, where you can get some follow-up damage on him too. When they appear later in the game as part of a horde of enemies, they just become an even greater annoyance. They become easier as you'll have more experience with the game and would have upgraded the Doomslayer more, but like I said, they're more annoying than difficult. Players will also have encounters whereby you will need to destroy a totem or particular enemy in order to progress, otherwise enemies will just keep spawning in constantly. This happens more later in the game and made me miss the earlier sections where enemies were already in the environment like I mentioned earlier. I find the choice to have these included is to solely increase difficulty easily, instead of providing challenge through more of a one-of-a-kind boss. It also started to make me question the problem of padding, which I mentioned earlier, a means to artificially extend the game's length without really offering anything new or memorable to warrant increasing its length. But even with these issues I found the game to have, Doom Eternal is a complete blast to play and sits alongside the other classic Doom games in the series. I would in no way be surprised if this shows up on many Game of the Year lists, with the only real reason why it wouldn't be would because it released so early in the year and many may have forgotten the experience by then. id Software has delivered a remarkable game, and one which for some will improve upon its predecessor, whilst for others they will still prefer the 2016 outing. But either way, there is enough here to blow you away, or at least enjoy the ride. Looking to the future, Doom is still in great hands and proves that it can still take a chainsaw to its competitors and come out on top.